At 0223 hours on a Wednesday morning in the Persian Gulf, 74 nautical miles southwest of Bandar Abbas, the surface of the water was glassy and undisturbed. No wind, no chop, the kind of stillness that sonar operators describe as a liability. Because in water, this calm sound travels farther, cleaner, and with far more precision than either side wants. USS Abraham Lincoln, a Nimitz-class nuclear-powered aircraft carrier displacing 104,000 tons, was holding a course of 185 degrees at 14 knots, her flight deck dark and secured for the night cycle. 41 aircraft were chalked and chained on the hangar deck below. A crew of 5,200 men and women were distributed across 4.5 acres of warship. Her escort screen, 2 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, USS Bainbridge and USS Cole, and a Ticonderoga-class cruiser, USS Chancellorsville, were positioned in a standard carrier strike group formation, Bainbridge running point 12 nautical miles ahead, Cole holding the port quarter at 8 miles, Chancellorsville off the starboard beam at 6. At 0223 hours and 14 seconds, Senior Chief Sonar Technician Raymond Kowalski, sitting at the AN/SLQ-25A sonar suite aboard USS Bainbridge, heard something that did not belong. I'm your host at US Defense Watch, where we break down the operations, the weapons, and the decisions that define who controls the world's most contested waters. What happened in the next 34 minutes wasn't a close call. It was a demonstration of exactly why no submarine in the world has ever successfully prosecuted an attack against a US carrier strike group and lived to report it. The Islamic Republic of Iran had been positioning this operation for 83 days. The submarine involved was IRIS Fateh, a 527-ton Fateh-class boat, Iran's most capable domestically produced submarine. Commissioned in 2019 and representing the most significant advancement in Iranian underwater warfare capability in 3 decades. The Fateh-class is a semi-heavy submarine, 48 meters in length, capable of 11 knots submerged, with a maximum operational depth of 200 meters and an endurance of 35 days. Her primary armament consists of 4 533mm torpedo tubes forward, loaded with a combination of Iranian-manufactured Valfajr heavyweight torpedoes, a reverse-engineered derivative of the Chinese U-3, and UT-27 wire-guided weapons capable of terminal homing on both acoustic and magnetic signatures. The Iranian operational plan had been constructed around a single intelligence assessment that the Abraham Lincoln Strike Group followed a predictable transit corridor when operating in the central Persian Gulf, a corridor dictated by water depth, traffic separation schemes, and the geometry of the Iranian coastline to the north. This assessment was not wrong. The corridor was real. The predictability was real. What the Iranian planners had not accounted for was that the Americans knew the corridor was predictable. Had anticipated that an adversary would exploit it and had built their defensive response around exactly that assumption. Iranian naval planners at the headquarters facility in Bandar Abbas had mapped this corridor over a period of 4 months using a combination of commercial satellite imagery, passive acoustic collection from seafloor-mounted hydrophone buoys, and open-source shipping data that gave them the carrier's approximate position to within 3 nautical miles on any given night. The plan called for IRIS Fateh to establish a patrol position at a depth of 140 meters along the projected transit corridor, hold station for up to 72 hours if necessary, and wait for the carrier group to enter her engagement envelope. Torpedo firing range against a surface target moving at 14 knots using a wire-guided weapon with active terminal homing was assessed by Iranian planners at approximately 12 nautical miles. The Abraham Lincoln would pass within 9 nautical miles of the firing position. The geometry was considered favorable. The Iranian submarine commander, a 22-year veteran of the IRGCN underwater warfare branch, had trained for this engagement for 8 months in simulation. He believed his position was undetected. What he did not know was that USS Bainbridge had been tracking IRIS Fateh for 48 hours. A routine deepwater acoustic sweep conducted by a P-8 Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft out of Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar had picked up a faint mechanical transient at 0340 hours 2 days prior. A brief, irregular vibration consistent with a diesel-electric submarine cycling its snorkel mast in the pre-dawn hours. The contact was designated Sierra 11 and immediately forwarded to the strike group's embarked undersea warfare commander aboard USS Chancellorsville. Within 4 hours, the contact had been correlated with a gap in Iranian port activity reports. IRIS Fateh had not been observed at her berth at Bandar Abbas since the previous week, a fact that U.S. naval intelligence had already flagged as a Category 2 concern. The correlation elevated Sierra 11 to a firm submarine contact. The strike group was informed. The response plan was activated quietly without any change in the carrier's speed, course, or observable behavior. For 48 hours, USS Bainbridge had been running a covert trailing operation, maintaining passive sonar contact on Sierra 11 at a range of approximately 22 nautical miles, tracking every course change, every depth adjustment, every time the Iranian boat came shallow to snorkel. The Bainbridge's crew knew where IRIS Fateh was at all times. They knew she was maneuvering into a firing position. They allowed her to do it. They needed her to commit. Inside IRIS Fateh's control room, the atmosphere at 0220 hours was one of focused, disciplined tension. The Iranian commander had been at periscope depth twice in the past 6 hours to update his navigation fix, each time spending no more than 90 seconds with the mast raised before going deep again. His crew had performed flawlessly. His firing solution was clean. The Abraham Lincoln's acoustic signature, the deep, rhythmic churning of 4 massive bronze propellers pushing 104,000 tons of warship through the water, was clearly audible on the boat's passive sonar from a range of 11 nautical miles. Every element of the operation had gone according to plan. He ordered the forward torpedo tube doors opened at 0223 hours, initiating the sequence that his crew had rehearsed 200 times in the simulator at Bandar Abbas, to bearing 210, reducing speed to 4 knots and leveling at 140 meters depth. The fire control tracking team aboard Bainbridge computed the geometry in 31 seconds. The Iranian submarine was now 9.3 nautical miles from the Abraham Lincoln's projected position at 0230 hours. She was inside torpedo range. At 0221 hours, Bainbridge's commanding officer, Captain James Thurston, transmitted a flash message to Strike Group Commander Rear Admiral Patricia Walcott aboard the Abraham Lincoln. The message contained a single operational code phrase. Rear Admiral Walcott authorized the response package in 47 seconds. At 0223 hours, IRIS Fateh opened her forward torpedo tube doors. The hydraulic transient produced by 4 torpedo tube outer doors opening simultaneously at 140 meters depth is one of the most distinctive acoustic signatures in undersea warfare. Senior Chief Kowalski had heard it twice before, both times in simulation. He had never heard it for real until 0223 hours and 14 seconds on a Wednesday morning in the Persian Gulf. He did not hesitate for even 1 second. Torpedo tube transient Sierra 11 bearing 347, range 9.2 nautical miles. Hostile weapons action imminent. The call went out on the tactical circuit at 0223 hours and 19 seconds. Every ship in the strike group had already been on silent alert for 48 hours. Every response system was already warmed and ready. What happened next unfolded with a speed and precision that the Iranian submarine commander, had he survived to describe it, would not have believed possible. At 0223 hours and 44 seconds, USS Bainbridge went to flank speed and turned hard to bearing 347, directly toward the Iranian submarine's position. Her SH-60R Seahawk helicopter, which had been airborne and holding a covert position 8 nautical miles northeast at 200 feet above the water for the past 3 hours, received a targeting update and immediately descended to 50 feet, activating its dipping sonar. At the same moment, a second MH-60R helicopter launched from USS Chancellorsville's flight deck and began a high-speed transit toward the contact bearing. At 0222:40 hours and 11 seconds, IRIS Fateh fired. 2 Valfajr heavyweight torpedoes left her forward tubes in a 4-second interval, both weapons set to active acoustic homing at a depth of 8 meters. running at 40 knots on a bearing of 185 degrees toward the Abraham Lincoln. Wire guidance was active. The Iranian commander had a firing solution he had committed. What the Iranian crew was not tracking was that the Abraham Lincoln had altered course 22 degrees to starboard at 0:22:30 hours and 58 seconds before the torpedoes left the tubes based on the Bainbridge's targeting call. The carrier's course change, executed at 14 knots by a ship of 104,000 tons, did not look evasive. It looked like a routine station-keeping adjustment. But it changed the geometry of the torpedo intercept solution by enough to add 4.7 minutes to the weapon's runtime, and those 4.7 minutes were all the time that was needed. At 0:224 hours and 33 seconds, the Bainbridge's MH-60R Seahawk achieved positive sonar contact on both inbound torpedoes at a range of 3.1 nautical miles from the carrier. The weapons were running straight, hot, and normal. The helicopter's crew reported the contact in 6 words: 2 fish, active homing, bearing 005. At 0:22:50 hours exactly, USS Bainbridge fired 2 Mark 54 lightweight torpedoes from her starboard torpedo tubes, not at the incoming Iranian weapons, but at IRIS Fateh. The Mark 54 is a 323mm, 608-pound weapon capable of 40 knots and active/passive acoustic homing to a depth of 1,200 feet. At a range of 8.7 nautical miles, time to target was calculated at 13 minutes and 22 seconds. The weapons entered the water and accelerated immediately. At 0:225 hours and 14 seconds, USS Chancellorsville fired 2 RUM-139 VL-ASROC anti-submarine rockets from her forward VLS cells. Each ASROC carries a Mark 54 torpedo as its payload, rocket boosted to a point several miles ahead of the launch ship before the payload separates and enters the water. The weapons flew a ballistic arc, reached their entry point 6.2 nautical miles downrange at 0:225 hours and 41 seconds, separated their payloads, and deployed 2 additional Mark 54 torpedoes that began active homing searches of the target datum immediately. The Iranian submarine now had 4 American torpedoes in the water, approaching from 2 different bearings simultaneously. At 0:226 hours, IRIS Fateh's sonar operator reported inbound torpedo contacts. The Iranian commander ordered emergency deep, a maximum rate dive to the boat's crush depth limit of 200 meters, and simultaneously fired 2 decoy ejectors to port, deploying acoustic noisemakers designed to seduce the incoming Mark 54s away from the hull. The decoys were effective against 1 of the 4 weapons. 3 continued tracking. At 0:226 hours and 39 seconds, the Abraham Lincoln's AN/SLQ-25A Nixie towed acoustic decoy system was deployed to port, drawing the 2 Iranian Valfajr torpedoes away from the carrier's hull. The first Iranian weapon acquired the Nixie decoy at a range of 1,400 meters and turned to follow it at 0:227 hours and 02 seconds. The second weapon continued on a closing course toward the carrier for an additional 44 seconds before its active sonar head locked onto the Nixie signal and diverted. Both Iranian torpedoes detonated against the decoy at 0:228 hours and 11 seconds, 1,100 meters off the Abraham Lincoln's port beam. The explosions were visible from the carrier's bridge as 2 rapid white flashes below the surface, each producing a waterspout approximately 40 feet high. The Abraham Lincoln was undamaged. At 0:22 hours and 53 seconds, the first American Mark 54 torpedo achieved active sonar lock on IRIS Fateh at a range of 340 meters. The Iranian submarine had reached 196 meters depth and was turning hard to port at maximum speed, 11 knots, attempting to clear the threat bearing. At that depth, at that closing speed, the geometry was terminal. The Mark 54's active sonar updated its firing solution at a rate of 50 times per second. The Iranian boat had no viable escape route. At 0:230 hours and 07 seconds, the first Mark 54 impacted IRIS Fateh at frame 24, directly beneath the forward torpedo compartment. The 96-kilogram shaped charge warhead detonated at a depth of 196 meters, At that pressure, approximately 20 atmospheres, the detonation produced a hull collapse that was complete and instantaneous. The boat did not flood, it imploded. The acoustic signature of the implosion was recorded simultaneously by USS Bainbridge, USS Chancellorsville, and the seafloor SOSUS arrays across 3 separate sensor systems. Time of loss was logged at 0230 hours and 07 seconds. There were no survivors. IRIS Fateh and her crew of 43 men went to the bottom of the Persian Gulf in 9,200 feet of water. The second and third Mark 54 weapons acquired the debris field and detonated against wreckage at 023 hours and 14 seconds. The fourth weapon exhausted its fuel and sank. Total expenditure of American weapons: 4 Mark 54 torpedoes and 2 VL-ASROC rockets. Total engagement time from torpedo tube transient to confirmed kill: 6 minutes and 53 seconds. At 0234 hours. Rear Admiral Walcott transmitted a strike complete report to 5th Fleet headquarters in Bahrain. The Abraham Lincoln resumed her original course of 185 degrees at 14 knots. The flight deck crew began preparations for the 0600 morning launch cycle as if nothing had occurred. To any external observer, any commercial satellite passing overhead, any Iranian coastal radar station monitoring the strike group's electronic emissions, the carrier battle group looked exactly as it had at 0200 hours. Same formation, same speed, same course. The engagement had happened, been resolved, and been absorbed into the operational rhythm of the strike group without a single visible ripple. At 0309 hours, the strike group's Judge Advocate General Officer completed a preliminary legal review of the engagement. His assessment, forwarded to 5th Fleet within the hour, contained 2 findings. First, the engagement was legally justified under Article 51 of the United Nations Charter as an act of individual self-defense in response to a confirmed hostile weapons action. Second, the response was proportionate, necessary, and executed in strict accordance with the rules of engagement in effect for 5th Fleet operations. The report was classified at the top secret sensitive compartmented information level and would not be declassified for 25 years. What happened between 0223 and 0230 hours in the Persian Gulf that Wednesday morning demonstrated something that no amount of Iranian naval investment, no amount of training, and no amount of operational planning has ever been able to overcome. The United States Navy's undersea warfare architecture is not a reactive system, it is a predictive one. By the time IRIS Fateh opened her torpedo tube doors, she had already been tracked for 48 hours. Her firing position had already been computed, and the weapons that would destroy her were already authorized and ready to launch. The Iranian commander made his decision to fire, believing he held the initiative. He had not held the initiative for 2 days. The second reality this engagement exposes is the layered depth of American carrier defense. The Abraham Lincoln was never in serious danger. The Nixie decoy system was deployed as a precaution. The Iranian torpedoes never came within 1,100 meters of the hull. Between the undersea tracking provided by Bainbridge, the helicopter-borne sonar assets from 2 ships, the ASROC coverage from Chancellorsville, and the carrier's own countermeasures, the strike group presented a defensive architecture that no single submarine, operating alone, can penetrate. The IRGCN sent their most advanced boat, their most experienced commander, their best weapons. None of it was sufficient to overcome a system that had been tracking them since before they reached their patrol position. The Strait of Hormuz and the broader Persian Gulf remain the most heavily monitored body of water on the surface of the Earth. Every Iranian naval vessel that transits those waters, on the surface or below it, does so with the knowledge, or the certainty, if they are paying attention, that American sensors are watching. The Fateh-class submarine program represented years of Iranian engineering effort and significant national investment. That investment is now sitting in 9,200 feet of water on the Gulf floor, alongside 43 men who believed that preparation and commitment were enough to defeat the world's most capable naval force. In 6 minutes and 53 seconds, the United States Navy provided the definitive answer to that belief.